How do? My name is Andrew Hancock and I am a VMware technical architect from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I have worked with VMware since their birth in 1998, so that has been over 24 years I've been working with the VMware product catalogue. Some of my close colleagues may say, if you cut Andy in half these days, it reads VMware like a stick of rock from Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I have now written 130 articles and recorded 10 hours of VMware vSphere videos for Experts Exchange and received 41 Experts Exchange awards over the last 10 years working with the Experts Exchange community. I am currently the overall #1 point earner in the Hall of Fame at Experts Exchange. I am honoured to have been accepted into the VMware vExpert program since 2011 and more recently a VMware vExpert Pro for the last 3 years.
And welcome back to another Hancock's VMware half hour. And I've been wanting to do this video to also run alongside the article that I've recently written about how to P2V, V2V for free, VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.3, and to highlight some issues that you're probably maybe going to see with 6.3. And for those that maybe don't know, VMware discovered a zero-day vulnerability in VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.2 in about January 2022. I think it became apparent, and in about February 2022 it was removed for download by VMware from the site. You could find other hosting bodies around the internet that had a copy of the latest build, and at that time I happened to have VMware Converter actually installed on this laptop, 6.2. So at the time, the last version of VMware vCenter Converter was VMware vCenter Converter Standalone. That's its full name. We often call it VMware Converter 6.2 0 build 8466193. Now this is the version that has the zero-day vulnerability, and I'll post a link in the description that explains about the kernel zero-day vulnerability that exists in VMware vCenter Converter Standalone, and you can read it there and you can judge for yourself whether or not that you actually believe it to be a risk for your organization or not. The actual zero-day vulnerability actually exists in a driver, vstore2-x64.sys, and the reason why it exists as a zero-day vulnerability is because if you use the WinObject System Internals product and you have a little look at the driver and you have a little look at the security on the driver, you will notice that everyone has read or write to that driver function, or to the driver, and therefore you can leverage many exploits through that particular driver. Now, if you don't actually have VMware vCenter Converter installed on anything, then you've not got the driver installed, and therefore your machine is not vulnerable to attack. So if you're only using the product to install, do a conversion, deinstall it all, then I think the risk is pretty minimal. But I will leave that up to you to decide. So that was 6.2. And very recently, September, October, eventually, VMware vCenter Converter has been republished by VMware. It's now 6.3, build 205755345. And in actually looking at the product now, it doesn't seem to have changed a great deal. Doesn't really give us many more functions, doesn't really give us an awful lot more support on what we can convert, but the zero-day vulnerability that exists in 6.2 has been resolved. There are, as listed here, some more operating systems that it supports, some more operating systems it can be installed on, and then some operating systems that it can convert. The reason for this video is I wanted to show you, because there has been some confusion in the past with VMware vCenter Converter Standalone, or let's just call it VMware Converter. It's too much of a mouthful, especially after I've had a little bit of wine. So VMware Converter, I know that there's an awful lot of you out there in the community that still have Windows XP, still have 2003, still have 2008, and 2012 R2 will be going end of life next year. And I think VMware Converter really is probably the most popular topic that I see in the virtualization space at Experts Exchange. And certainly I have written far more articles on VMware Converter than any other topic. And I wanted to address really the white rabbit in the room, because VMware will often state that they cannot support the product on an operating system if the vendor no longer supports the product. So Windows XP, Windows 2003 went end of life many years ago. I can't remember now, but it's been a long time. But obviously there's still an awful lot of Windows XP. There's still a lot of Windows 2003 out there in end user land, and people are still going to use VMware vCenter Converter Standalone to convert it. Stop. I have noticed, and I will demonstrate, that VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.3 seems to have some issues with certainly Windows XP. Now this is not what I showed you previously, because I've done another video and I've done another article actually showing you that you can use VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.2 to P2V and V2V Windows XP and 2003, and I've demonstrated that. But when I was keen to see whether or not that anything had really actually changed in the code, and I tried to install VMware vCenter Converter 6.3 on my trusty Windows XP box here, which it is physical, and I will actually post you. It's very, very difficult really virtually with cameras and things. So what I'll do, I will take a picture of the BIOS booting up, and I'll leave it. I'll post it as well, so you can actually basically see that this is actually a physical box. And we keep a number of physical boxes around specifically for this, and this is a really old physical box, and it does surprise me really that the spinning piece of rust in there is still spinning and it still boots. Anyway, so I'm going to connect to so I'll post this in the description, and I'll post the link to the 0-day vulnerability so you can have a read of that, and I'll post the WinObject as well. So I'm going to connect via RDP to our Windows XP. So here I'm up in the clouds. I'm sure that you're all familiar with this if you're as old as I am, and you've been around when Windows XP came out, then you'll recognize the cloud background, etc. And those of you who've been around as long as me, you will see that this particular machine did have vRanger Pro backup running on it, which is I think vRanger, I think, is now part of Quest and maybe part of Dell, and actually is pre-Veeam actually. Veeam didn't exist when this originally came out, and this is obviously the VMware infrastructure client for vSphere or VMware infrastructure 3.0. So at present we already have installed on here, in fact left over from the last video and the article that I did, we have VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.2 build 8466193. So at the moment I can, and I've done many articles, so we can say powered up this local machine, and I'm going to send it basically to vcenter.cyrus-consultants.co.uk, which is actually our production vCenter system for the moment. So now I know that there are some people in the audience that are going to start saying, "Oh, I wouldn't have a Windows XP on my LAN. Oh, it's not very safe, etc., etc., etc." This is actually sitting on a private development LAN alongside all the other stuff in in the VMware lab here, so it's not actually on our main production LAN. It's on a VMware lab LAN, which is a 192.168.182.x address, which you will see if you've watched all the other videos that I've done. You will know that that's the VMware LAN that we use. So there are no nasties that can get on this, hopefully, fingers crossed, and there's nothing that can get on this and go back because of the firewalls in place. So I'm going to ignore that certificate, and I don't know, I'm going to put A1, and I'm going to choose vSAN data store. Next, and we can do the usual thing, and we click finish. And I'm not actually going to go through and do that conversion, but that actually shows you that the services are actually running, and I could actually submit a job. So what I'm going to do, we've also downloaded VMware Converter 6.3, and I'll let that unpack. This is a very slow machine. I think it's about 200 megahertz Pentium, something like that. I'm going to have to check the video after, because there's been some very, very strange things. I haven't actually returned to the lab for a few months, and like everything, you know, you turn the machine back on again and the displays are all looking a bit different. And I had a problem with OBS that was complaining about the video driver, and the Quadro drivers are at the latest on this laptop, and I'm wondering whether or not that all this is going to be such a high resolution that you're not going to be able to make up any of the text, because I'm struggling here, really, to be honest with you. I'm just wondering whether if I actually put my glasses on. No, it doesn't make it any better at all. It actually makes it worse. Okay, so we're just waiting for Converter Standalone to install. Now, I have tried this several times on some different XP machines as well. When I used VMware Converter Standalone 6.3 to do a V2V conversion, that worked with no issue, but the V2V conversion was done on a Windows 10 machine. So now we're actually doing a P2V, a proper P2V, with the recommendation if you want to do a physical to virtual conversion, you actually install VMware Converter actually basically on the machine to do the conversion, and that way you get around any permission issues that you will see. Now it sort of kind of said, I think I read the release notes, and it sort of kind of turned around and said that upgrades are not technically supported, so you have to uninstall the version of VMware Converter you have first before installing it. So I was a bit surprised when obviously we still have VMware vCenter Converter installed, and I've just executed the new version, and I'm just going to go through and do next, and so we'll agree to terms and conditions, and a local installation, and say next. Yeah, we'll join the customer improvement program, and we'll do install. I was surprised to see that it's not actually basically giving me an error message saying sorry, no can do. You're going to need to uninstall and reinstall before I do the installation. It doesn't tell me that, it just goes on and does it. But one of the things I have noticed is that what it does actually do, it does actually uninstall the current version first, and then it actually basically goes off and installs it. So it's actually doing the validation of the installation, and then you'll quickly see that it actually uninstalls. So you can see it's removing files now. So it's actually uninstalled. So that does seem to be a little bit misnomer, because it does actually state in the release notes that you can't upgrade. You've got to uninstall it first before installing. But from what I can see here, the installer is actually uninstalling the application for you before it actually does the installation, which I must admit did concern me a little bit, because I'm thinking, as you will see in a minute, it doesn't really do a very good job of installing the new software, and of course when you do a rollback, it effectively rolls you back to nothing, because it's already actually uninstalled VMware vCenter Converter. And I've done this two ways. I've installed this on Windows XP without any version of VMware Converter, and I've installed it when VMware Converter is already working correctly. So it's now creating this shortcut. You can see a shortcut's just appeared there, and it's starting the services, and fingers crossed, hopefully it's going to do exactly what it's done before and fails. I hope it does, because otherwise I'm going to look a complete fool. But it does seem to be basically taking a while here, so hopefully it will actually fail. And this is actually what I wanted to show you. Here we go. So the error message, if you can't actually read that, says error 1920 service VMware vCenter Converter Standalone server brackets VMware-converter-server failed to start. Verify you have sufficient privileges to start the system services now. The error 1920 services VMware vCenter Converter is a very, very popular error message around VMware vCenter Converter. If you do a Google, there you'll get lots of hits. And some people have suggested it's to do with the timeout in the services. Some people have suggested to do that it's permissions. You need to run as a local administrator. I am running as a local administrator. Some people have suggested that it's a local policy that the administrator account can log on as a service. The administrator account here has been logging on with the service, and it was previously running VMware vCenter Converter 6.2 with no issues at all. And even if we go to services and we have a little look and try to start the service manually, nope. And you do cancel, and you say yes, I want to cancel, and it does a rollback action, but of course all that rollback action is actually doing is just rolling back. Could not start. It's just rolling back 6.3 install, leaving you with nothing. So just to prove, 6.2 does install on this particular machine, and I'm hoping that it will install and I don't have to do a restart. And what I will do, when I get this started up, I will actually basically go through and do the conversion, and we'll come back to it later and we'll summarise. It might take a while, might take a very long time to do this, because this machine as well has only got a 100 meg interface, I think, or a 10 meg interface. Okay, so we're going to do next again. I'm not going to do any different. You know, I've not changed any permissions, I've not logged in, logged out, I've not restarted, I've not logged on with another user. Yes, we'll join the customer improvement program. I'm not quite sure really what that does, or whether or not that they do actually basically get any customer improvement messages saying that I'm running on Windows XP. I did have a number of people that actually turn around and say that, because I tweeted about this, and I had a couple of people turn around and say, well, I think you need to raise a ticket with VMware because there's a lot of people in the community that use Windows XP. I've not done that because VMware support are most likely to turn around and say, well, you're installing it on an unsupported operating system, the end. But I think the answer here is, if you still do have legacy systems like Windows XP, Windows 2003, Windows 2008 around, and you struggle installing the latest bug-free VMware Converter 6.3 and you get an error, then try an earlier version. However, the earlier version, as I've showed you, does have a 0-day vulnerability. Now this is rather interesting here. There we go. Did you see that there? That started the service, registered the product. We've got our icon back there. And we'll run that as well now. So there you go. You know, message me what you think it is in the description. As shown, 6.3 will not install on this particular machine. 6.2 does. I can only believe that it's something to do with the service. that they've now created. So we're going to go on as I've showed you before, and we're going to get this machine converted under 6.2, just to show you that, you know, it does do the conversion. So I'm going to log on with that. I can't easily see the screen, so I'm sort of kind of pre-guessing and pre-typing what I'm typing in here, because I can't easily see it. So I'm going to just pad that out, and we're going to put that on the vSAN data store. What I'm going to do as well, I'm just going to drop back here, because I'm just going to all I've done there is just adjusted the size. So I'm just going to copy the minimum size that I need, which is 26 gig of data, and I'm going to click finish. Now you've seen all this before. I've done other videos on how to do P2Vs, I've done video, done articles. I'll put them in the description as well, so you can have a little look at those. But this is really just sort of show you for shits and giggles, really, that, you know, VMware Converter 6.2 does install on Windows XP SP3. VMware Converter 6.2 installs on Windows XP SP3. VMware Converter 6.3 does not. And if you look, I've not seen any specific messages yet with 6.3 and people not being able to install it on Windows XP, but there are lots of other 1920 errors that exist around VMware Converter over the years, and a lot of people have actually basically got around the issue by dropping back a version. So something is changing between the versions, which is causing the product not to install. Ideally, not a problem. Just bear in mind that if you are actually going to use an early version of VMware Converter, that there is a zero-day vulnerability that you may actually want to have a little look at the risk of that, using that in your organization. But it exists in the driver, and if you're just using it to do a conversion, and once you've done the conversion you're going to install all the software, then the driver's not going to exist, and therefore the vulnerability is not going to exist if you're only using it for a tool for conversion. However, of course, there are plenty of other tools now. The Veeam agent has the ability to create a V2V and a P2V, and I've done an article about that as well, and I can basically put that in the description for you as well. And there are lots of other third-party products now that will do P2Vs and V2Vs for you. However, they are going to cost you some money, you know. But whilst we've still got legacy kit around, P2Vs are still going to occur. There is discussions that VMware are going to update VMware Converter. Whether or not that's going to be a complete rewrite, and it's going to be a big change and very, very different, or whether or not that it's just going to be a subtle bug fix, because I have noticed that even a few of the later Ubuntu versions are not supported. So I don't think 20 and 22 I think is supported. 18 may not be supported either. By supported I mean it cannot convert them. It doesn't understand how to convert them. So I'm going to let this rattle on. It's still at 1%, so it hasn't really actually started doing any conversion yet, and it's saying the estimated time is 1 hour and 3 minutes, and that's a bit, not sure that's correct, because it's probably going to be about 9 hours or so before this conversion finishes. So I'm going to let that convert, and then I will come back and summarize for you. So I'll be back shortly. So I'm back, and it's the morning after the night before, so I wanted to deliberately wear a different t-shirt, different day, and this is an Experts Exchange one, and I'm just going to have my slug of espresso out of my Experts Exchange Original Tech Community mug. Oh, thanks for that. Okay, so just a very, very quick summary as to where we were and where we'd left off. and some takeaways from this. That we saw that I already had VMware Converter 6.2 installed on a Windows XP machine, and I showed you that. And then we installed VMware Converter 6.3, and it did uninstallation of 6.2, installed 6.3, tried to start the services, failed with a 1920, and then completely rolled back, leaving the machine with no vCenter VMware Converter installed. I then manually installed 6.2, created a P2V job and submitted it, and when we left off, it was saying that it was going to take about an hour to complete. So let's actually go back to our machine, and I've just got an RDP connection into it here, to 192.168.182.103, which is on our VMware lab. And as you can see, it's completed. It started last night at 9:27 p.m. and it finished this morning at 8 a.m. And as you can see here in the statistics, it actually basically took over 10 hours and 32 minutes at a transfer rate of 561 kilobits a second, which is slow, which is to be expected. This is an old Windows XP physical machine, running on some sort of Intel FX 440 motherboard, I think it is, using a network interface, which I think is probably maybe even 10 or 100 meg. And we've done a successful physical to virtual conversion using VMware vCenter Converter Standalone 6.2. What a mouthful that is. So I think your mileage is going to vary. So if you actually basically use the latest 6.3 and you start trying to install it on legacy operating systems, Windows 2003, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 2008, you may find that you also fall into this issue whereby you can't install it. If you can't install it, you've then really got some you've then really got to look at some other options. You could look at some third-party options, and I've listed a few. These are not an extensive list. This list has grown quite considerably, but certainly you could use Carbonite Move, PlateSpin Migrate, Acronis Backup, Veritas System Recovery, Paragon Virtualization, EaseUS P2V Copy. Those are all third-party tools which are going to cost you some money. Veeam Agent for Microsoft Windows version 5 now, you can use that. It's free. That will basically do conversion. Or you can assess the risk that exists in 6.2. And now 6.2 has obviously been delisted and it's not available for download from VMware anymore. So if you've already got a copy of it somewhere in your archive, don't delete it. You may find that it will come in handy. So that's all really that I've actually basically got to do in this video. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully it's about half an hour. And so thank you very much for watching these, and come back soon. And in the next video, we're going to have a little look at some PowerShell scripts developed by William Lamb, and I'm sure that you know who William Lamb is. There's no need for me to explain who he is. But we're going to have a little look at one of his latest PowerShell or PowerShell core scripts to deploy a VMware vSphere 8 nested vSAN lab. Something that I've been wanting to look at for a few weeks now. So I thought we'd do a little quick video. We can talk about nesting, and I think it was in a VMware webinar that I was in, vExpert webinar, I think last year, where I think some of the presenters were actually sort of kind of saying to us, it's about time that we got used to looking at nesting as a means to create labs rather than bare metal. And certainly with the rise in energy prices in the United Kingdom at the moment, I certainly think a lot more of us vExperts are going to start looking at nested virtualization for VMware labs rather than using bare metal because of the cost of electricity. I think my electrical cost at the moment is about 45 pence per kilowatt hour. you can do the sums. Electricity really at the moment is, and that's increased, from about 10 pence a kilowatt hour. So we've seen a 30 pence per kilowatt hour increase in electricity almost overnight. It starts, we're quite low power. We moved to a lot of low power SSD based technology a long time ago for our labs to reduce the costs. But these 50 watt an hour, 24/7, all these little pennies start to add up. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and please come back soon, and when we can look at a VMware vSphere 8 in a nested lab. So thank you very much.